Okay, in today's video, we are gonna review some things related to site planning. I will go through that kind of like the lecture part of today a little bit faster, just because we already had a day related to site planning. Um, and then we'll do some demos and see how a site plan relates to AutoCAD and how to put those plans in. And if the recording seems jumpy at all, I'll apologize in advance. I have a stuffy nose today and I keep sneezing. And I'm gonna try to pause before I sneeze because I figure you guys don't want to hear it, so that it might seem like it jumps around a little bit because of that. But to review, the site plan is that overall area, the piece of land that you're going to be building on, or the property that was purchased. And it shows how our building is going to sit on that site, any modifications that we have to make to that site, um, and also the restrictions for that site as well. So other things that we might get from the site plan is a um, kind of a study of the site conditions, which may be a little bit harder to see on the plan itself. That's just something that just comes from visiting it. And we would see pre-existing conditions within the top topography with dash lines, and we would have solid lines then for those modifications that we are proposing. Um, so as a review again, that site plan has our property lines, which is the legal boundary of your site, and then any constraints like setbacks and easements. And so your setbacks then are the land that you're allowed to build within, and it doesn't necessarily have to be even on each side of the property. So this phantom line here, this is my property boundary, and then this dash line is my setback. So how far away from each side of my property line am I not allowed to build? And then this would be area that I am allowed to build. And an easement, again, is just kind of a legal document giving someone access to a part of your site or to a specific area of your site. And they'll typically will be done for municipal purposes like water or electricity, but you can have them for other means. So for example, there's an easement on my property for my driveway, so that way my neighbor can access the driveway to get to her house. And the reason why, instead of it just being, a handshake deal between my landlord and my neighbor, that they decided to make it a requirement in legal setting in the easement is so that this way, if either party sell their land, um, that still is allowed to happen, and it's still a legal requirement that both would have to fill. So if my landlord, he wouldn't sell his land, but if he did sell his house to someone and that person was a jerk, they could stop poor little Wilma from getting to her house, technically, which would just be a really horrible thing because Wilma's a sweet little old lady. So that's kind of things that cover easements. Your site utilities, so any existing utilities or proposed utilities for electrical, for sewage, for anything else in between. Um, Conditions such as the topography and the groundwork, or any trees that may be on the site. Access like roads, um, those natural environmental features. You may even put kind of some solar study analysis stuff in a site plan, but typically that would just be a copy of the site plan done separately with all of the things related to solar analysis if you want to. Um, Things that you can't see in the site plan are such as like neighborhood character. That comes from research of visiting the site. Um, like I said, that solar analysis, you could maybe make a separate plan that will show kind of the sun paths on the winter solstice and the summer solstice. But ultimately, you can't see that necessarily in the plan. That just comes from research and visiting the site itself. Things that we would see on the different layers of the site plan is those lot lines and those bearing dimensions. Um, the description of the site conditions, so things like what zoning it is, and so the zoning is just um, that municipal system of controlling what activities and structures are permitted on pieces of property. And those are dedicated or defined rather by the government agencies. Those setbacks, maybe some height restrictions too, which I don't know if in Watauga County or if in Boone there are big height restrictions. I know in much more urban areas um, there'll be height restrictions put together, and it's going to vary based on where you are for how tall you can necessarily build. Um, all of the stuff within the site plan is typically put together by a civil engineer, and then they share that plan with you, or it's put together by a land surveyor and they'll share that with you as well. Here, I believe I just have it linked to the GIS viewer, yeah, which sometimes takes a while to load. But so if you're ever interested about a piece of land, almost all towns and counties now have this digitalized, where you can look at any piece of land and you can see who owns it and what it's zoned for. In some ways, it's kind of creepy. In some ways, it's kind of cool. And we can even put like the kind of satellite map on it. And so I'm pretty sure this is ASU here. No, this is not ASU. Here's ASU, so we can see that, there's this piece of land right here. And whoop, there we go. And so I can see what the property is, who owns it. I could then even maybe get information for how to contact them, so that this way, if I was interested in buying it or purchasing it, I could. And this exists for, like I said, almost all towns have this digitalized now where you can just go and kind of creepily see it. So like here again is the high school. I could just click in that piece of land and whoop, and I could figure out who owns it. So Watauga County owns this. Um, what it's zoned for, so it's zoned for educational purposes. But you can even do this, we could be really creepy and do it for private places. So I can see this belongs to Brooke and Martha. Hi, Brooke and Martha. It's kind of a really helpful tool for when you're trying to find pieces of land to work with to see if it's for sale, what it's zoned for, what can it, um, all of these other pieces of kind of information. You could figure out how much the tax cost on there. Don't use this for creepy stalker purposes though, because that won't be cool. But yeah, that's some GIS maps. Um, and so again, we have that topography, which is the contour lines that show the different points of elevation above sea level of the land. No piece of land exists in a perfectly flat dimension. And even then, you generally don't want to completely make the land flat with nothing else going on with it. Um, and each one of those contour lines on your drawing represents a difference in that height change. If those contour lines are closer together, it means then that you have a steep area, or if they're further apart, it means then that you're going to have kind of a little bit more of a gradual one. And especially then if those intervals change too. So if we have big changes in intervals, um, for these contour lines, that again is going to mean that this is a very steep area that we have to label, every 50 feet rather than labeling every 5 feet. Um, so in this particular instance, it maybe is a little bit steeper over here, but then it kind of flattens out a little bit over here on our piece of land. And so those slopes and those contours are shown via topography lines. And so we have here in plan versus in elevation, or in section rather, underneath it. I'm not going to move my mouse down because then that little slide deck thing will just cover the picture that I want, that I'm trying to refer to. that picture all the way at the bottom is that same site just shown in section view, so we can see how it just kind of slopes down as it gets closer to the north side, because of course it went in the way because we can see our north arrow is pointing that way. So it's just a way to communicate that slope. And again, we show it with the dash lines, we show how it exists already, and then we would use solid lines for how we're going to modify it. We'll see utilities and things too, so we'll see things like drainage, electric services, any other public utilities we're using. Where the new building is going to go, we'll add in, where any other structures, parking lots, maybe walls, sidewalks, things like that. Any landscaping information of things that we're going to be changing added would get added in as well. So if I had a large place that I was going to be landscaping, I would add in all of that stuff. Okay. If you're seeing this, it means I figured out how to splice two videos together, because instead of hitting pause, I accidentally hit stop, and I don't feel like going back and redoing it. And then we have our grading information, which is the proposed modifications to the site. And the number one reason why we grade things is to provide drainage. And it really is important for where your building is going to define how you grade your site. And just a few days ago, I had someone email me about putting together some plans for them, because their cousin used to work at the high school, so their cousin gave them my information, and they were like, listen, we're in kind of a bind. We had two people who were supposed to put plans together for us. They didn't. We have the excavator and everyone coming to our site, like in 2 weeks to dig everything up, and we need plans made. Can you help us out? And I unfortunately had to tell them, no, I can't. I do not have time to do that for you. But I also told them I would really recommend you holding off getting anyone to come to your site and dig anything just yet. Because if you don't know where your building's going to be, and you don't know what the exact floor plan or foundation plan is going to look like, you really don't want to excavate a big old hole for it just yet. And that's because the grading, its purpose is not just to make a nice flat area to work with, it's to help get water away from your building. And if you just completely flatten a whole lot, well, you've made a perfect place for water to just sit around, or you've adjusted or graded the lot not according to where the building's going to be and what the layout of the building is. And now you've created potentially pockets that water can pool around. So it's always a good idea to know what the heck you're building before you dig the site out. And will they listen? Probably not, but it's not my house, so I guess do whatever you want with it. So before I went on that tangent, grading is just how we're going to modify the land to ultimately then help push water around. So as we can see in this little plan down here that the slide deck thing covers, is that our site is sloping downwards as it gets to where the building is right here. And I would move my mouse down to show you where the building is in this section of it, but I don't want that thing popping up again. So as water is coming down, going down this hill, when it gets to here, the reason why we've graded or we filled in this area is so that as water gets here, it kind of gets pushed around the building on either side. So it hits this little hump here, and it just slowly will just kind of get pushed around the building. Is it going to get rid of 100% of water and just make this area behind my building 100% the driest grass you've ever seen? No. But it's going to help deal with a significant amount of water problems. So now I won't have to deal with water possibly infiltrating my basement or mold issues infiltrating my basement. So it's very helpful to have things like that. Um, so those new proposes, we call them grading. Um, and like I said, it is primarily to control that water movement and drive it away from our building. We can either have cuts where we take dirt out of areas, or we can have fills where we put dirt into different areas. Um, you can also have particularly near maybe like streets or sidewalks, you can put swales, which you'll see on the sides of highways quite a lot. There'll be kind of just that little depressed area in there so that as water comes off of they can get water off of the road and just collect it kind of in those divots. Or crowns where you can kind of maybe create a little bit of a hill peaked area to just get water to move quickly into either side. So planning out your site, and I'm going to be honest, I forgot what I linked here. Okay, sounds great. He's going over site planning. Because the thing that you really have to think about when you're planning out your site is that a building does not exist in isolation. All of the practices we are going to do in this class, we're doing for a completely fictitious building, and therefore it just kind of exists in just this gray void, in which, you know, when we were in SketchUp and you made a piece of land for it, it was just kind of a big rectangle, flat piece of land that was sitting perfectly at 0, 0 elevation. That's not the case in reality. You're never going to have that. Um, and so you can really use a piece of land to your advantage with things like passive solar, and effective wind orientation. And Revit, once we get into that software, has a lot of helpful tools in it that can make those solar analyses or analysis, I don't know how to plural it, but I guess it don't matter, rather easy. And things like wind orientation, well, that maybe just will take visiting the site to kind of see it. But we really want to try to minimize sun exposure in the east and west, and try to maximize southern facing exposure or windows for our building. And that is one of the prime concepts of passive solar design. And so if I was recording this at my house, I would maybe then, well, I don't have a camera at my house, but anywho, I guess I could do it with my phone, but I digress. Because where I live has really, really great passive solar features to it, in which I've got a bank of just southern facing windows and then concrete floor right in front of it. And so in the winter, the sun is lower in the sky. It beams through those windows. And not only do I get a lot of natural light, but then I get natural heat. It gets absorbed into that concrete floor. And then at night, when the interior of the house or apartment, whatever you want to call it, cools down, that heat comes out of the floor and helps keeps everything at a pretty nice temperature. And so I've probably said it before in videos, but I really don't have to turn heating on. I have a little plug-in radiator that I can use, but I really don't use it all that often since I moved in there. Um, then in the summer, the sun is higher in the sky, so it's not just beaming into those windows like it would in the winter, but also there's lots of trees in front of the southern windows anyway. And in the summer, those trees fill with leaves, which provides some nice shade. And so then I still get a lot of natural light, but I'm not getting the heat from the sun anymore. And that's pretty much the main idea behind passive solar is you're getting that natural light, you're getting natural heat when you need it, you're getting shade when you need it. And it just helps reduce electricity bills and heating costs pretty significantly if you do it right. Also just encouraging natural air movement within a house. So trying to have windows that could maybe create a slight wind tunnel. You don't want it to be something that is too overbearing, but just so that air can kind of flow through the house when the windows are open. That's something that my house does very poorly. Because since it's built into a hill, I just have those southern windows and that's it. There isn't even a window in the bathroom, which is not great. I would really like to sometimes be able to vent that bathroom out, but you kind of sometimes, I guess, you've got to take some losses with you. Um, you want to minimize grading too. I know that it's not impossible, or I know that it is kind of impossible to not change the site in any way, shape, or form, but we still don't want to have to just completely create an entire brand new site that isn't anything like the natural one. Um, you also need to, there are some things too, like I said, that you can't see in a plan. So maybe there's just sounds and other impacts for around the site that we can't see graphically in the site plan. So maybe it's near a really busy road, or maybe it's near in kind of area where there's lights going on all the time. And so then you want to try to kind of maximize privacy, maybe using landscaping or things like that. Those are things that maybe you can't see in the site plan, but still, for good design, you would need to take into consideration. So now how to put a set of plans together. The first thing you would do is you would create the property lines and any existing contours, any major features such as roadways or big structures that are already there. Then you would add in your building, and you would do that based on the roof plan. So on the site itself, you're drawing the building out, accounting for the overhang that's going to be on it. So you would just add your building onto the site wherever you're going to be putting it. And again, remember, you have to think about minimizing um, too much grading or changes to the site, but also trying to find somewhere that has um, some provided slope to allow for drainage. I personally also think it's a good idea to just try to avoid changing too much of the natural landscape around it. Then any site improvements. So are you adding in any driveways, walkways, any retaining walls, any additional landscaping that's going to be happening in there? Then any finished grading you're going to add. So again, these are the changes to the site so that as water slopes, let me just double check these numbers. So yes, water is sloping down here. So as it gets to here, we're just trying to kind of make it go away from our building, make it go away from our building. So that way it doesn't pool up. And then any additional notes, a legend to help understand what the heck some of the things are, so that these big black dots, those are trees, and those are the trees that are supposed to stay. And then we know that the phantom line is the property line, and I'm going to stop moving my mouse so that thing stops popping up in front of what I want you to look at. So we'll have kind of a little legend that shows just what the different line types and what the different symbols on our drawing mean. And then also, here's another good example of a north arrow of true north versus assumed north. Um, so this is what we're saying is north, just to make our plan make a little bit more sense, oriented on this drawing. However, actual north is technically just this way, skewed a little bit. But rather than having our plan kind of on that skewed angle, we're just saying, hey, listen, we're going to call this north, but just so you know, technically north is a little bit more degree-wise to the right. Here is a big old site plan. Technically, this is a planting plan for several residences in Blowing Rock. So it's not just one particular house going on here, but it's kind of just showing how, once again, so this is on a very steep mountaintop. That's why these contour lines are so close to each other. Um, and all of these little circles just represent the different trees that are going to be going around, the road leading up to it, a little court area to turn around in, um, then some of the different pieces of land going on in there, some hiking trails and steps going down. Um, so much, much larger than things that we would typically be dealing with. Okay, so now how does this relate to AutoCAD? So if you guys go onto As You Learn and you go into this week, currently it's hidden, but by the time I post this video, this week will no longer be hidden. Um, there's a little assignment there for CAD site plans. And in there, and I really should rename it because it's not assignment 15, it's assignment 14. There are the instructions. So using AutoCAD 2021, we're going to create a site plan saved as a DWG using the template that's up on As You Learn. And the information that we've talked about last time we talked about site plans and today is create a site plan itself. You'll submit it via As You Learn. You have to do it by at least the end of this course to receive credit for it. I feel like that's rather obvious, but I'll just remind you guys again that these progress participations things, you can do them at any time for full credit. They're worth 50% of your overall grade, so skipping out on these is just a really, really dumb thing to do. And I would appreciate if you use the naming convention where you put your name in the file just so it makes it much easier for me as I'm grading these to figure out what I'm doing. There's lots of little notes here which we'll go through, or I'll go through as kind of go through the assignment for the annotation scale, the different lines and layers that we should be using in areas. And then here we have the site template file, which is a DWT. Now, DWTs are drawing templates, DWGs are finalized CAD drawings. And I noticed from a few people who turned in progress submissions for the major CAD assignment, they were still saving it as a DWT, which you don't want to do, because what it does then is every time you open up a brand new drawing in AutoCAD, it's going to open up with that last template you ever used. How you're doing it, I'm not quite sure, but there's something in the way you're opening your file that's saving over the template. So I just clicked on it to download it, and then I'll just open it up, and we can see that what's happened here is, yes, I opened up this file that is called TEC1728 site template. However, that is not what it's called in AutoCAD. So AutoCAD opened it up as its own separate brand new drawing, which is what I want it to do. So if when you open yours up, if it still says up here TEC17 template DWT, you're going to need to do a save as, or click on file or the big red A, save as, and you're going to need to change it to a drawing, a DWG. I'm not quite sure why it's doing that for some students, if it's a Mac thing or just something of the way that they're opening it, but it is something of how you're doing it that's making it do it that way. For another little tangent here about computers, one of my all-time favorite things is when students tell me, I don't know, the computer just did it that way. The computer is not, there is no computer other than HAL 9000 that has sentient thought. The computer is not going to do anything you didn't tell it to do. And there are going to be plenty of things that you do that you don't realize you did it. But you did something, and that's why the computer turned out that way or put the line wrong. It's because you told it to do that. Um, and so, opening it up as a DWT doesn't mean like, oh no, you've messed up, you're the worst, you need to quit and find a new major. It just means you need to go save the drawing as, or you can even click on new. So you could go to File, New, click on that button there, come here, click on New, and then go into your Downloads folder, which I guess I can find in here, and then just start a new folder from a template. So starting a new drawing from a template, then we'll start it as a DWG file like we want it to. Now that I'm done with that rant, first thing I'll do is save it. So I'm just going to Control S or Command S if you're on a Mac. I'll put it on my flash drive here, and I'm just going to name it TEC1728 underscore. Do I want an underscore or a dash? I always forget. Sometimes I switch it up just to feel fun, Underscore, last name all caps, first name all lowercase, and then dash site plan. And by the way, that last first, it means put your last name and first name. Some students, I find it really cute, some students put last first, which I don't know, I find that adorable for some reason. But okay, now I have it saved. This way too, it will just periodically save it for me. This way, if AutoCAD happens to crash, I might not lose all of my work. I may lose some of it, but I might not lose all of it. And now I'm ready to start the project. So I have here a site plan already kind of pre-done for me. I just need to change a lot of the layers that I'm working with. I also, as I've mentioned before, I like to work with my properties bar open. For those of you on Macs, it might already be over here on this side, your properties bar. I like to have it on the left side, don't know why. And if you want yours open, all you have to do is click on something in the drawing, right click, properties, and then it'll open up this little panel. It might start it off floating in an area, but I like to have it snapped there. I just personally like to work with it, but you don't have to. And we'll start with step 1. We're going to set the annotation scale in model space and paper space to be 1 inch equals 30 feet. So since we're working with a site plan, we're working with a much larger drawing scale than what we would do with a floor plan. And so we are going to change that annotation scale right down here where it says 1 to 1. So that means full size. We are going to change it to 1 inch equals 30. And that'll also just help change some of our different line weights, or rather line type scales in our drawing. And a good rule of thumb too is after you change the annotation scale is to use the command regen or art, like regenerate, enter, and that just kind of refreshes the drawing. Didn't change anything because we haven't done anything to our drawing yet, but like I said, it's just kind of always a good idea. Whoops, not that. There we go. So next step is we are going to change some of our line types, and we'll look at the layer descriptions to figure out what the heck some of them should be. And there's a few notes. So the stream and the road, as well as any site utility, should be on the layer C site. All of those circles that aren't defining the meets and bounds of the property are trees. All hatch patterns should be on the layer pat or poche, depending on the type of hatch used. So if it's a pattern, I should be using pat. Otherwise, if it's a solid fill, I should be using that poche. I don't know if I pronounce it right. I don't speak French. But that just means that it's solid, and they are 2 different colored grays, which means they print differently. And so it's important to make sure that we're in one or the other. And any descriptive notes and the north arrow should be in the layer Anno. So let's look at our layer properties for a bit. And we've got some layers in here, different ones than what we have in our AutoCAD drawing for our house. But we've got this annotation layer, which is for notes, text, leaders, and symbols. We've got def points, which remember is a layer that technically doesn't print. So this is our guideline layer. If we want something to show in our drawing, we definitely don't want to put it in this layer. Our pattern layer, our solid fill layer, title block, and viewport. So this with paper space. Sorry, I just realized there might be some weird jump things because I was using my arrow keys to go through this, and then I realized that my arrow keys either pause or start. I set them as the shortcuts to pause and unpause, so I won't use them anymore. So this is for my notes and my text and my leaders. This is my non-printing layer, my pattern layer, my solid fill layer, my title block and viewport, which is for paper space. And I was saying that we'll look at paper space a little bit today, but we have a whole day dedicated for that one. Then our site conditions, our building that we're going to propose on here, any planting, so planting trees and other landscaping, our property line, our setback, our proposed changes to our topography, and then our existing topography lines. And they've got different line types associated with them, which we can override for particular ones if we need to. And another thing also to keep in mind that sometimes throws students off is that white lines in AutoCAD print out black. So this line here is printed in the color black. And you think about that, it's because if this was a sheet of paper, I would not have this dark black background. I would have a white background, so it's kind of just inverted. Every other color here would technically get printed out with the same color if we weren't using a color plot table, but white actually equals black when it comes to AutoCAD. So I'm going to start changing some of my line work around. And so I'm just going to start highlighting different things. So here's my property lines, and I can just zoom in and out, hold down to use the pan tool. This little symbol right here just means that this is the point of beginning. And so I'm just going to kind of pan around, click on all of these options. And so remember, that's the scroll wheel. Holding down the scroll wheel on my mouse allows me to pan. If you don't have a mouse, you could use the little shortcut here, but I just highly recommend you get a mouse. It's a good idea. And I'm going to switch those to my property site plan, in which will make them red and also make them phantom lines. If they aren't showing up as phantom lines, it's probably because you skipped this step here where we switched its scale. And so then they look like that. So again, you just click on here, 1 inch equals 30 feet. And then you have to type in the command regen to refresh the drawing or regenerate it. And then they should be looking like phantom lines. So the next thing I'm going to do too is just take all of these existing topography lines. So if I just click and release and drag my mouse to the left, I get that cross window selection, and I can do multiple ones. I don't recommend dragging and trying to do this weird lasso tool, but if it works for you, you can. And I accidentally clicked some lines of the stream and I missed the road, but I got the stream in there, and it's okay because I could switch them back. And so I'm just going to switch those over to topography existing, hit escape, and then realize, oh no, I didn't mean to select those. And I can go back and I could change them to site, hit escape. And even then, so if I selected a bunch of things and then maybe just wanted to remove one or two, if I hold down shift, while clicking on something that I already have selected, it will deselect it. And so I want the stream to be in the site layer. I want the road to be in the site layer. I want these trees. So in this way, I'm clicking and going to the right, which allows me to get a window selection. And so with the window selection, it has to be entirely inside. With this one, it just has to barely touch. With a window, it has to be entirely inside. And so I'm just going to select my trees here. I could go and click on each one of them individually, but don't know about you guys. I'm feeling a little lazy for that. And then I'll just click here and say I want those to be in this plant layer. And it'll turn them into that blue color. I know it's really hard to see on the black background, but you'll have to just trust me. And actually, oh, crap, I actually lied to you guys technically. So this does not mean point of beginning. That's actually the double circle one, which is somewhere. So this is the point of beginning one. These actually are site utilities. And so is your water or your drainage. I'm not sure which one it is, but we can pretend that this is our electricity one, or rather this is our electricity one. This is our drainage one. Sure, why not? Which we want in the site layer. My apologies. But like I said, we can just go and change them and it's okay. All right. And so we've got all of that changed, and now we are going to add in some text and then for some different parts. So we're going to change our text here to be in the Anno layer, and then you're going to name the road to be your first name or whatever name you go by, road, and the stream to be what your last name. And if it doesn't fit all in one line, that's just fine. So you'll just double click on the text and you can change it to be your first name, road, and some students, they don't like how it fits like that. You could technically click on it and use the rotate tool, click on a place to grab it by, like you can move it around if you want to. You don't have to, but if you want to. And then I'll double click on the word stream and I'll make it Miller Stream. Beautiful. For our next trick, we are going to label the elevation on the bold lines, which denote every 5 degrees of change. At the bottom of the page has an elevation of 3,333. The stream is the lowest point on the site, and we're going to add in text with a monospace of 3 feet. So there's several ways we could approach this. And so what it wants us to note is that this is the absolute lowest point. So right here, this bold line, this is 3,333 feet. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. This then is the lowest point, and then it starts back up again. So it moves down and then comes back up. So technically, this as well is 3,333 feet. And then this is that plus 5. This is that plus 5. So 2 ways we can approach it. I'll show you the technically correct way and then the little cheat way, which, whoops, I forgot to change my north arrow, so I'm just going to click on it, switch it over to Annotate. So the technically correct way is to be able to go into the text tool, and I'm just going to click on text or keyword shortcut M text, click somewhere to start it, click somewhere to end my text box. This is where I would change my text size. So I can say that I want it to be 3 feet because it was currently at 1/8. I could also use this drop down. because I already have some text in here that's 3 feet, and we can see that it technically looks ginormous. Feet, and then click on close or just click somewhere out of the text box, and then it got to normal size once I X'd out of it. I then can click on it to move it into place. I can say, oh no, I forgot to put it in the right layer, and then move it into the right layer, and then use the copy tool, keyboard shortcut CO, click on somewhere to grip it, move it, click to place it, click to place it, escape to end the command, and then I could just double click on this and change this one to that +5, double click on this, change that one, and then I'm good to go. One way I could do it would be that way. Let me just Control Z a bunch to make the text go bye. There we go. Another way I could do it is takes this text that already exists, copy, click a place to grab it by, plop it down in each one of those spots, hit escape, and then just double click on these text boxes and change what they say. Because this already is text done at 3 feet, we can see here that its text is already at that. And so it's a little bit of a cheating way, but not necessarily. But if you ever need to make text and there isn't just some there for you to copy already, that's the tool of how do you use it and work with it. And I'm just going to use these grips to just kind of move them a little bit closer to the lines that they are associated with. And okay, so now I have those pieces of annotative text right next to them, and I've got this step done. Now we're going to offset the front parallel to the road and rear parallel to the stream property lines in 20 feet. And on the sides, we're going to do them in at 10 feet. And this is going to be our property setbacks. We'll use the trim and extend tools and then put them in the correct layer. So I'm going to use the offset command to make these. I'm going to do a through offset just because it's what I like the most, but also since I'm doing several different size offsets. So I'm doing 20 feet from the road and from the stream, and then I'm doing 10 feet on the side. So since I'm doing different sizes, to me the through one would make most sense in this scenario. So I'll go back into AutoCAD, keyboard shortcut O, or this button right here, and it's asking me to specify the distance I want, or, and because it already says through in that box, and it says through in those little caret brackets in the command bar, that means if I just hit enter, it'll do that option. So this is where I could type in 20 feet and then go click on the lines I wanted to offset. I'm just going to leave it as through, so I'm just going to hit enter, and then I'm going to go select the lines I want to offset. So I want to take this line, bring it in 20 feet. Make sure you're putting that foot mark. Otherwise, it's going to do 20 inches. In 20 feet. In 10 feet. In 10 feet. In 20 feet. In 10 feet. Now I'll use the trim and extend commands to kind of cut this up in some areas, which actually I think it's just in one area right here. They don't meet like we need them to. And so the command for extend is EX, or located underneath the trim tool. I think if you're on the Mac, they are just separate buttons over here on the left. But EX, enter, and we can see that it'll just take this line and it'll just bring it to meet there if I click. And then I'll hit escape. And now I'm going to go into trim, which is right up here, or keyboard shortcut TR, enter. And then I'm just going to click on these lines so that way I can just cut everything to meet nice and even. So I'm just going to make this into kind of a nice even pattern, and then I'll switch its layer over. Sometimes too with these like hidden lines, or rather these dashed lines, it can make it a little harder to see what you're trimming to make sure it's all the way you want it to, but it'll be okay. And then I'll hit escape to end the command. I'm going to make my command bar bigger. I don't know why it was so tiny. And then I'll just click on the lines I want to change. And it looks like, whoops, see, look, I clicked on that circle instead of the line I wanted. So I'm just going to hold shift and click on it. Click on the line I actually wanted to click on. And I'm going to change its layer to this setback layer. And so that then is defining the legal boundary of this piece of land that I could build on. We still have a little bit more of that to do, so we'll get to that in just a moment. Ooh. And I've got this step good to go. Now we are going to offset the stream boundary 25 feet from the stream. So this is a wetland easement on the property, so we are not allowed to build within 25 feet on either side of that stream. Because it is an easement and not a setback, we are not going to do it in the setback layer, but we are going to change it into a hidden line type just for this particular layer. So we can change things for specific layers, not necessarily changing the entire layer setting. And so I'll go back into AutoCAD and I'll go into the offset tool, which is right here, or keyboard shortcut O. In this case, since I'm doing 25 feet on either side, I could type 25 feet beforehand, hit enter, then select the object I want to offset, the side I want to bring it to. So click on the side I want to bring it to. Side I want to offset, side I want to bring it to, and then hit escape. Now, what I want to do is leave these in this site layer, but I want to just change the line type for just these two specific lines. Two ways I could do that is one, in this properties bar up here, I can come to my line type, and instead of it being by layer, I can say I want those to be hidden. Or, and let me just hit Control Z to undo that, come onto these two lines, and in my properties bar that I have open here, I could also change it to be, instead of the line type by layer, I can have it be hidden lines, and then escape to end the command. So a few ways I could do that. Really, they both are controlling the exact same thing, but I just tend to have this properties bar open, and it's also because, and this is another, I guess, little tangent, but I'm preparing my high schoolers for their certification test, and like all of the answers for the certification test you just find here in like this data points and geometry stuff. So that's really why I have it open, but not related to you guys too much. All right, now we're going to hatch the stream with the pattern ANSI 31 in the appropriate layer. So we have that layer for just patterns. We want the hatch angle to be 135 and the scale to be 192. So I'm going to switch my layer beforehand just because I think it's a good idea, but I'll show you how you can switch your layer after the fact if you accidentally do it in the wrong one or start in the wrong one and realize it. So I'm just going to switch my layer to the Annotation, and then I'm going to go into the hatch tool, which is right here, or keyboard shortcut H, enter. And so I want ANSI 31, which we already have. I want an angle of 135 and a scale of 192. So unfortunately that text box came up in the way, but that's how we change them. We can type in our angle, we can type in our scale. And then I'm just going to click in the area that I want to hatch. Because I have some of these setbacks pointed up, I do have to do them separately, but this could be where I might realize, oh no, I didn't do this in the right layer. I can click on this word properties and I can change the layer that I'm currently in. So if you start in the wrong layer, you can always just click on that word properties and change it. The other thing too is that I have to hatch in these areas, but if I try to, I'm going to get this error code that it can't find a closed boundary. And that's because hatch is looking for a closed area to fill in with that pattern. And let me hit close. And there is no closed boundary to fill that pattern in. But I also want to have this as kind of a nice little opening to kind of infer the fact that this stream carries on and on and on and on and on, far past where my piece of land exists. So I'm going to move myself into that depth points layer, and I'm going to draw lines. So that's L, enter, to just kind of cap it off on either side. L, enter, click, click, escape. So that way these lines don't print out, but it now gives me an area that I could fill in with a hatch. I'll go back into the hatch tool without changing my layer to show you another way that you can easily change your hatch if you do it in the wrong layer. So I'm going to go back into the tool, H, enter. It remembers the settings I used last time, so I don't have to change my pattern or my angle or my scale. It remembered all that. But now I'm just going to click in those areas. Don't know why those changed to depth points. Hopefully when I hit escape, they won't, because that's a first for me. Yeah, there we go. I hit escape and they're back. Huh? Kind of interesting little glitch. And now I realize, oh crap, I did those in the wrong layer. It's okay. I can just click on them. And when this hatch editor opens, I can either click on properties and change them, or I could even click on the home tab while I still have them selected and come to my layer drop down and change them. So if you do it wrong, there are ways to change it into what you need it to be. Next step is we are going to draw, and we're actually going to switch this. It's not going to be 18. We're going to make it 12 because initially, or you know what, we'll leave it at 18. Why not? We'll just pretend that there's a back deck to it. Because like I explained when I introduced the big CAD project, typically we add an extension onto this building that makes it a little bit wider than 12, but we're not going to do that for this one assignment. But for our site plan, we'll pretend that we're adding in a big old porch in the back. Is we're going to draw a 24 by 18 rectangle to represent a building footprint with a shed style roof. And on the south side, we are going to add in our porch on the on that kind of southeast corner of the building as well. So we are going to locate where this building is going to go using intelligent site design strategies to help maximize kind of some passive solar, minimize grading modifications, and without removing existing trees. So we're going to attempt to place this building where we're not going to remove any trees. We can't go over any setbacks or easements because that would be illegal. We have lots of winds coming from the northwest, which is also where having in some of those trees stay there was going to be helping us. Um, and then we'll move on to the next part of it. So, with our piece of land here, we cannot build outside of these green lines. And we also can't build anything within 25 feet on either side of this stream. And so that can kind of go to show you that when you buy a piece of land, you really do need to research it at least a little bit to figure out easements and site restrictions. Because even though we technically own this entire area over here, which, let me just draw a line, like just from here straight down, that's about 50 feet worth of area from the stream to our property land, and that's not even the highest point of this stream. And then another line, we'll just go from like here to here, about 140 feet. It's a pretty big, decent piece of land down here, and the only area we're allowed to build, and I'll just hatch it in with a solid pattern, just for your own. I don't know why it's doing that. This is the only place we can build on this entire side of the stream. And we're really not going to be able to get anything. Let me just see if I could. Oh, I was trying to avoid snap points, which, see, it came over here anyway. So a little fun thing, if snap points are bugging you, you can hit F3 on your keyboard to turn them off, or this button right here. And now let me just draw a line from about this highest point down. It's about 7 feet. Maybe I could fit like a little shed right here, if that. Um, so while I own all of this land, this is my property, I really can't build anything on this southern part of the stream. And even then on this upper part, and it would be easier too to turn my topography off temporarily for that. And so again, we can just turn some of these layers off, which is why we like to use layers. So I could just click on this little light bulb and I can make topography go bye-bye. And so then that really only leaves this area. And so I'll do another hatch in bright yellow so we can see it as our building space. But again, we want to try to remove or avoid removing trees. And so, and especially since I've got lots of winds coming in from the northwest, having these trees here would be to my advantage anyway, because they'd block a good amount of them, but still allow for natural air to kind of be able to go through. And so that really just would leave, let me Control Z to undo that, probably like around, not even that much. Just shrink it down. So like probably like right there is the area that I could build on this piece of land. A little bit larger, sure, but not too much. So this is a circle with a diameter of 61 feet, give or take. So sometimes can go to show you that you can get a really big, pristine piece of land, but not be able to do a whole lot with it. Let me turn my topography back on. So I'll just click on that little light bulb and it has come back. And be in my building layer so I can make my building site of 24 by 18. We're just going to pretend that we did add in that extension because I don't feel like re-uploading that document, honestly. Which is a silly reason why, but why not? I'm going to use the rectangle tool to do it, which is right up here, or keyboard shortcut REC. And then click somewhere to start it. And then I'm going to type in 24 feet, hit the tab key, 18 feet, enter. And that made my building. It doesn't necessarily have to go directly here, so if I want to move it around too, I can just select it, go to the Move tool, or keyboard shortcut M, enter, click somewhere to grab it by, which I'm now realizing I still have my object snaps off, so I'm just going to turn it back on. And I can move it around. I think I want it a little closer to the stream, just for me. That's what I would like. Not that I really ever go outside, but I could pretend. And then I'm also just going to add in a little porch on the side. So I'll measure in my 4 feet for my porch, 4 foot out, 3 foot this way, click, escape, back into the line tool, 3 foot this way, click, escape, take this line and delete him, and then out 11, hover over that snap point so I can grab on it, back into line, out 11, whoops, not 11 feet, so Control Z for me, hover over that snap point, or I could type in 6 feet. Not gonna, one way or another, I'm gonna get the same end result. 6 foot wide, 4 foot deep porch, 2 11-inch steps, and we are going to hatch the building footprint using a solid pattern. And so again, one way to make this a little easier to hatch is I can take my layers, I can turn topography off temporarily, so that this way, when I go to hatch it, so I'll go into the post layer, and I'll say I want a solid fill, and click in each one of these areas, hit escape. I didn't have to click around the topography because I had just turned it off. If it does this where it, for some reason, like puts the topography in front of your lines, 2 ways you could try to combat that is regen to regenerate and like refresh, or if you click on the hatch itself and then right click, draw order, send to back, and that'll put it behind the line work, and you may have to refresh to redo it again. And I think redraw does the same thing now. I'm pretty sure that regen and redraw do the same thing. They used to not for some reason. So let's try here. If I move this to the front, well, now it's not going to let me do this, is it? Now it's just going to update automatically no matter what. Let's try this. If I switch my scale and then just do redraw. Nope, didn't change anything. Or, yeah, I don't know why they just won't make them the same thing, but okay. Anywho, enough of my little tangent. So next then is we are going to name the building footprint 1-story building, BLDG, with a text size and model space of 3 feet. So again, 2 ways I could do that. I could take the text that's here, copy it, or I can make my own new text. So I'm just going to go to this text tool, say that I want to make a text box from here to here. If I keep it at 1/8 of an inch, it might look normal-ish while I do it. And let me just switch my layer to this Anno one. So I can call it 1-story BLDG, period. But it's incredibly tiny because it's 1/8 of an inch in this building. And remember, this building is now 24 feet wide, and this text is 1/8 of an inch tall. So if you ever make text and you can't see it because it's so tiny, if you double click on it and highlight the whole thing, you can change its size. 3 feet, enter. Another thing too that it didn't happen to me, but it's happened before, and this could be just a 2021 thing that they've changed it to update it. Um, but if it makes like a really ugly box around your text, kind of like what it did here, um, you can double click on it and you can apply a mask to the text. And so applying a mask or a background mask allows us to put a drawing background color. So I could, say that I wanted it to be lime green behind it. Or in this case, I would probably want to just select a color and use this gray. 99% sure it's gray number 8. Yeah. So I could just put a background color of that on it. Or I guess it's not gray 8. No, it's not. We can find out what gray it is by going into our layer properties. So it's 258, 252, very different. And we could apply that background mask to it. So let me just say mask and then select the color 252. See, it is a different gray. I can't deny it. And to your and my naked eye, it might not seem like that big of a deal, but to the computer, when we run a color plot table, the difference between those two grays is going to be something printing out completely black or printing out with a light gray color to it. So you can apply a mask to it to just make it kind of blend in. I don't know if masks work with patterns. Let's see. If I put a mask, I say use drawing background color. No. See, I know what we could do is we could delete that and delete this hatch while we're at it. Or wait, would this even work? I don't know. Feel free to just sit there and blunder. Why is she going over this while I try to figure this out? Is I'm going to make it that pattern through here, which Control Z. Why are you filling that whole area? Hatch. It's claiming this area isn't filled. But there we go. Control Z. There we go. Sometimes Hatch can do some pretty interesting things. And like there it told me that that area wasn't filled. Let me change my pattern. Make sure I'm in the right layer. Okay. And now, when I go to put text in there, it'll be a nice filled background instead. Does that make a difference? No, it doesn't. But hey, maybe it was bugging some of you guys, and so there's how you would fix it. So if you put text in after you put a hatch in, it will just fill the area in, which is why I probably didn't need to put a mask on this because I had already hatched it and then put text on it. But I digress. Now, for the last part of the project, which I'm not going to show you exactly what I'm going to do because I want you to use your noodle a little bit for it, is you are going to draw in proposed grading modifications for a draining pattern for the flow of water around the building footprint. So remember that we want to make it so that as water is flowing down here to get into the stream, we want it so that it goes around our building, not just hits our building and then pools up directly back here. And so you could use either line, polyline, or even potentially the spline tool to work your way through this. And so remember, spline is located under draw right here, or keyboard shortcut SPL. And we are going to switch over to the Topo 1 layer. So this is the layer for your proposed changes. And to add in those, like I said, we can go into the polyline layer. And what I would recommend doing is hovering over snap points so that this way you don't directly snap two edges. And sometimes you might have to turn snap points off. So for instance, even though my mouse currently is all the way over here on the right, if that green box shows up, that means if I click, it's going to that point, which maybe I don't want it to do. Chances are I don't. And so you can turn that snaps off here by using this button or Command F3. And then if I go into the polyline tool, it won't snap to anything. And so I could say that, you know, I want the water to come through here and around my building. And then I can use the trim tool to just cut it so that it looks a little bit nicer. What I would recommend instead of polyline is the spline tool. And so again, that's under draw right here, or keyboard shortcut SPL. Because with spline, you're able to get those kind of nicer, organic, contoury like lines that you would typically get. And so you'll add in any proposed grading modifications, whether it be kind of just some crowns to get water away. What's going to happen once it gets down here? Because if it just comes back to here, well, that's not great. Is there going to need to be some more going on up here? I don't know. That's what I'd like for you to tell me. And so again, too, if you're using spline, make sure you don't hit escape after you draw the splines. Make sure you hit enter, because hitting escape will actually just stop your line entirely. I don't know why that's the one tool that works that way, but it does. And once you're all finished with your site plan, give yourself a big pat on the back. Make sure you save it, and then you can upload it onto As You Learn. And that is all from me today, guys. Thanks for sticking around. If you have questions, reach out to me via email, but I feel a sneeze coming on, so I'm going to hit stop before it comes, and I'll see you in the next one.